This episode of Hot Pursuit features Investigator Gillespie, who has been with the Orange County Fire Authority since 2005 and in the investigation unit since 2019. Investigator Gillespie discusses two unique cases. The first case involves a fire at an auto shop in the city of Garden Grove. The fire was initially reported as a commercial structure fire, but it was actually located in the parking lot and consisted of piles of cardboard. Was it arson? Keep listening to find out. The second case involves 11 different fires that occurred over an hour and a half. A molotov cocktail was found at one of the fires and an unsuccessful wicking device. This was clearly arson, but now investigators narrow in on the suspect. Do investigators catch him or her in time? Sunlight, Sanitizer, and Shenanigans. This is Hot Pursuit.
Stories from the fire investigation's front line.
This was a type of unpredictable weather event the Orange County Fire Authority had trained for.
Firefighters responded to the 2200 block of South Susan Street with the report of a commercial structure fire.
Fire investigators are still working on their full report about the cause of the fire.
Investigators need to pick through the debris and answer important questions like, how did the fire start?
The suspect was arrested and charged with 4 counts of arson as well as reckless endangerment.
Welcome to Hot Pursuit, the podcast where we dive into the mysteries and investigations of fire-related true crime cases of the Orange County Fire Authority Investigations Division. I'm Sophia Champeau.
And I am OCFA Fire Captain and Fire Investigator Scott Coleman. And together, we'll take you behind the scenes of some of Orange County's most fascinating and often chilling fire investigations. From arson to accidental fires, we'll explore the evidence, the suspects, and the untold stories that emerge from the ashes.
Every episode will bring you a new case, breaking down the events that led to the fire, and talk to the experts, including fire investigators, law enforcement, and forensic specialists, to give you an inside look at how these cases are solved. Just like you, I'll be hearing these stories for the first time. So sit back, relax, and join us as we uncover the hidden truths behind some of Orange County's most intriguing fire investigations. This is Hot Pursuit. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back.
Hello.
Hi, good morning.
Thank you for being here and joining us. We have a new guest today.
We do. I would like to introduce him if you don't mind.
Yes,
He's
please.
one of my favorite partners to work with, mostly because we work all the time together. He's Investigator Gillespie. We both came on to the investigation unit here in Orange County Fire Authority about the same time, about 5 years ago.
Yep.
Although he's not my regular partner, he kind of does some shift trades with my partner. And so he's probably the investigator I spend the most time with. And what's great is we both love the science aspect. And then when we get on scene, we rarely talk until one of us gets to the end of their conclusion. And then we just challenge each other. And we love the odd, and we love the ones that take a lot of science. And so I'm really excited to introduce Investigator Gillespie.
Welcome.
Good
Thank
morning.
you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Love it.
Awesome. Did you start with OCFA, or did you also lateral over from another agency?
No, I started with OCFA about 2005 and then promoted to captain in 2016 and been in the section since 2019. So
Awesome. Thank
just
you so
like
much.
Scott said, a couple about the same time.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to hear your story. Scott says it's a good one, and as per usual, I know nothing. Shall we dive in?
Yes, let's go.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to. Scott brought me on to talk a couple of different cases. You know, we're very busy in the section, but sometimes different calls kind of stand out, whether they have a little bit something more interesting or something a little bit more different. You know, sometimes they're very common, but these two actually kind of stand out. They're a little bit more unique. So I'll start with the first one. It was a couple summers ago, and we got dispatched to a fire in the city of Garden Grove, and we got dispatched to a fire at a auto shop. And so there's a lot of things that go through your mind when you're going to an auto shop. You know, there's lots of oils, liquids, flammable liquids, ignitable liquids, vehicles, machinery, etc. And we got there, and actually the fire was on the outside of the building, and it had nothing to do with the auto shop. It just was at that location. It was actually in the parking lot, and it was a giant trash fire. And that's kind of what we had, and it was just piles and piles of cardboard, and the fire wouldn't go out. And it turned to come to find out that it was actually the pallets were all full of hand sanitizer. So basically ethyl alcohol, which is ignitable.
Wait, can I jump in here? So you're telling me that there's a bunch of hand sanitizers at a parking lot at an auto?
Yeah.
In the middle.
Or you mean a hand cleaner?
Yeah, the actual hand sanitizer.
So not like a commercial hand cleaner, like sanitizer would use to sanitize your hand after whatever.
Yeah. So what we came to find out later was that this company had seen an opportunity during COVID to make a little extra money. So they went and they bought thousands and thousands and thousands of bottles of actual pump hand sanitizer. They bought them overseas. They brought them over here. They relabeled them, and then they were selling them because COVID, that was a hot commodity.
Oh.
And so they had in their parking lot, they probably had 20 different pallets stacked high with thousands of bottles each pallet of this hand sanitizer. And as the fire had ignited and then extended, it had burned, it started opening up all these boxes, and then all the material was spilling out onto the parking lot, and they couldn't put it out.
Oh, wow. I guess I always knew there was alcohol in sanitizer, but I didn't realize how flammable that could actually be in that kind of scenario. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and with some research afterwards, we found out that the alcohol in the hand sanitizer is about 70% alcohol.
Oh, wow.
So pretty high.
Yeah.
Which has, an ignite rate of like 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's
That's
really
like nothing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very, very.
I mean, to a layperson like myself.
It just means
50
it's always
degrees.
off gassing, and so now it's putting out the vapors. And if it finds an ignition source, then yeah.
Right.
Wow. Will that burn for a very long time as well? Because it seems like gelatin. I don't know. To me, that seems like it might help it last longer. But
Yeah, the viscosity of this stuff was really fluid. It was almost like water.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it wasn't thick, but yeah, it burned for a long time, and there was so much of it. And as it spilled, it was going down the street.
Oh, boy.
It was all over the place. And so as they tried to overhaul and tear it apart, also to put the fire out, they're obviously causing more damage to the bottles that hadn't yet to be damaged, only spilling more fuel onto their own fire.
Oh, boy.
So it was a real big challenge for the crews working hard putting it out. So
Can I ask you then? So you pull up to this scene. You have a fire that is difficult to put out. You don't know it's the sanitizer yet. What are some thoughts through your head initially?
Yeah, so through what the process that we go through is the scientific method. So kind of a process of collecting that information. We take all the information, and with that information, we start to form a hypothesis, and then we start to test those hypotheses, and then we start to eliminate those hypotheses as we test it. So to Scott's point, I'm standing there, and we do our evaluation of the area and examination of the area, and I see that we have overhead power lines right over our area of origin. I see that we have vehicles. I see that we have equipment. We have a forklift that had been moving the pallets relatively not too long before the fire started. And we have an open space that's in an area where there's lots of transient activity. There's lots of people coming and going. So there's all these hypotheses that we're coming up with based on the information that we're gathering. So I have to decide or determine whether those electrical wires that are strung right above the fire had anything to do with it. And so we go and we find out that that the power was intact. They had no power shortage. There was no damage to the lines, actually. So I was able to eliminate that power line as a source, heat source.
Okay.
So we go through that process.
You said it was a shopping center, and did you get to leverage any cameras or anything like that?
So there was cameras, and it was a strip, like a commercial strip mall.
Oh, okay.
And so it was an auto shop area. And so there were cameras, and the cameras are motion censored. So the cameras, and this is actually very common for us. We got great cameras, and we get all excited, and then it catches only after the fire starts, because that's when the motion activates.
Yes. Sometimes my home camera's like that, and then all of a sudden I'll just see like a flying package, but no person, and I'm like, okay, well at least no one stole it, but I don't know. But all of a sudden something's flying on my thing. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
So the cameras caught basically after the fire had already started. That's what the motion was sensitive to, and so there was a fire burning within the pallets, which actually helped a lot because I was able to see where the smoke was coming from. It wasn't coming from the outer layer of the pallet. So we had four lines of pallets deep, and I had smoke coming through the cracks. It wasn't like I had fire on the outer layer.
Got it.
Which would be maybe more consistent with somebody walking over, bending over, putting a hand down, lighting it.
Yeah.
It was something more between, deeper in, that's more maybe less accessible.
Okay, interesting.
So can you describe the containers? How was it packaged, and then what did the containers of hand sanitizer look like? Because I think that ended up playing a role.
Yeah. So these hand sanitizer containers were these small individual, maybe a quart size of liquid, kind of like you would have on your bathroom sink. Just a little pump for like a handheld for like a soap. and they were clear, and they hadn't been labeled yet. So the company, what they were doing, this auto shop was doing on their off hours when they weren't fixing cars, they were taking these, they were putting labels on, and then they were selling them online on Amazon.
Got it. Oh, wow. They were very much pivoting for COVID.
Oh,
yeah. Probably making some good money.
Yeah.
And so they bought them without labels so that the bottles were clear and you could see right through them.
And they were
Got it.
kind of round, weren't they?
Yes, yeah, completely round, like a cylinder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that started to play a role because I started to have a hypothesis that possibly there was something to do with something unintentional that happened with those bottles.
Interesting. Okay.
So now you've got rid of the hypothesis of maybe some kind of electrical failure associated with the power line. The video, I think I remember you saying, didn't show any kind of car maintenance or repair occurring in that area. Matter of fact, if I remember correct, you just said it was just a bunch of pallets. And then a forklift was actually moving a pallet at that time.
Yeah.
And you were able to see smoke, but we couldn't see the backside of it. You're like, I don't know how I'm getting this smoke just generating.
Right.
And I remember we were doing some research, and then you wanted to test it further. I was so proud. So what happened then? So what's your hypothesis now that you just like, hey, I think this may be a potential cause? I'm like, yeah, it sounds like it might be. What was that?
Yeah, and from that research, one of my hypotheses was that there was possibly light refraction that happened. So light comes in and makes a prism basically, and kind of like remember when you were a little kid and you'd take a magnifying glass and you'd maybe burn a leaf, etc.
Yeah.
Well, one of my hypotheses was possibly with this clear round item, was it able to refract light and focus that light into an area to cause a little beam to cause something to become heated up.
Yeah, especially if that thing can ignite at 50 degrees. That's not very hot.
Absolutely. And so I went to the owner of the shop, and it's his material still. And so I asked for permission to take a couple of these bottles, and my goal was to go and replicate a little test on my own, because I wasn't sure if this material was clear enough. I didn't know if this material, the viscosity was going to be a effect. I didn't know if that was going to be a factor. And so I brought it back to here to headquarters, and it was a hot summer day. It was in August, and I stood out on the blacktop back there, and I built a little makeshift area that was similar, recreated kind of what we had on the scene. And I put multiple bottles, and I put it on top of cardboard, and I started to manipulate with my hands with this bottle of hand sanitizer, trying to make a magnifying glass. And I saw that I was able to take the beam of light from the sun and actually focus it down to an area and try to create a burn. But I couldn't. I could not get the light to focus enough to burn the cardboard. I took some dry leaves from behind where we park.
Yeah.
Nothing was burning, and it was just so frustrating. And so I did it about a dozen times, and I stood back, walked back to my truck, got some water, got some ice water because it was hot out there. And all of a sudden I look over, and once I set it down and stopped touching it, its natural setting with the base of it, the light refracted and was actually caused a little beam, and it started burning on its own without me touching.
How funny. You just walked away and that worked.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I want to be clear, because I think, Sophia, I think you're under the impression that the gel or the hand sanitizer is actually what started on fire.
Yeah.
It's the cylindrical shape of the container, and then the fluid in there is clear, and so is the container. So the sun will come and hit that clear container, and it'll then go through that clear viscosity type hand sanitizer, and then it focuses a beam onto the cardboard. And then it will take that 1 kilowatt of energy that it puts, that you feel on your skin,
Yeah.
and it focuses into like 20 kilowatts, and then that will make it start to heat, smoke, and then with a slight wind, you can get it to then transition to flames.
It
And
just
that's
picks up and then goes.
now it starts to burn that bottle, and now I introduce all that flammable,
Right. Then it's even more
ignitable liquid.
flammable because
Yes.
of the. Oh, how interesting.
And there was wind at the scene. There was about a 2-mile-an-hour wind that was coming through that area.
Huh.
And even that could be even focused more probably through a corridor, tall cinder block walls, right? So we have a 2-mile-an-hour wind out on the street, but however, in a corridor, that wind could be more focused.
Right. How interesting. So it ended up then just being just a total fluke of a.
So
How
it was
weird.
sunlight as the heat source that ignited cardboard through the refraction of the light condensed into a little beam
Huh.
on the cardboard.
Science. The more you know.
Because he was so excited. He's like, Scott, I did this experiment. I had to figure it out. And then he's like, yeah, the minute I walked away, it totally took off. I kept messing with it.
Yeah.
But
I
that was
love that to happen when you
that
walk
was great. And I know he was like really proud.
Yeah,
Nice.
it was great. It was a lot of fun to see. You throw up all those different hypotheses. You could I hypothesized the fact that COVID had kind of slowed down, and and we had talked, and during the interview, he had said, "I can't get rid of this stuff. We bought all this stuff, and we can't get rid of it." But we asked, and yes, it was insured. So of course, one of our hypotheses is, okay, is this an intentional start? Maybe by their proprietor, or maybe it's somebody walking by.
Yeah.
Was it the forklift that an hour before had been moving? Did the forklift piece of metal scratch a nail?
Yeah.
We had to consider all those things. But once we had
Even the time of day, like people are around, they're
Absolutely.
working.
Yep.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so once we had all those, we were able to limit all, and the only one we had left was the light refraction. So it was
Dang.
good. It was fun to use all those skills and put them in place and then apply them.
Totally. And as it's still climactic, but as anticlimactic as like arresting someone or whatever, the truth matters just as much.
So the one thing Ollie and I love, and like I said, is we constantly challenge each other on the scene. So
Yeah.
if he does the origin and cause and I do witness statements, he'll come in and he'll be like, hey, Scott, so here's what I'm thinking. And then I'll intentionally go, no, I think it's over here, just to mess with him and challenge him. And he never knows if I'm kidding or not. He'll be like, oh, man, I'll say, like, I'm considering this as the origin. He goes, no. And then I'll let him stew on it for 5 minutes. Come back, he goes, no, look, the airflow is this or that. And I'm like, no, I'm with you. I was just trying to
Yeah.
make sure your confidence level. He goes, gosh dang it. But we help each other because when you get to court,
Totally. The accountability.
we're
Yeah.
totally ready. So that brings me to last week, we ended up going to court and the public defender would not give an inch on anything. So I testified first because I think I was origin and cause on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you testify, I get statements from the first in captain in the fire crews. And so in a preliminary hearing, we are what's called Prop 115 certified, which means I can testify to what you said. I don't have to bring you into the prelim.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's so hard to get a court day where all of us can be there.
Totally.
So in my experience with this public defender, who Ollie and I both love it when they challenge us.
Yeah. Well,
She's
because
like-
you guys come ready.
We do. We process scenes waiting to go to trial. So we're already at that level. So she's like, well, he's not qualified. And so we had to go through that. And then I would, well, he can't do that. Objection. I'm like, man, she's not giving an inch. And then she asked really good questions like, well, what's the ignition temperature of this? What's that? And I'm like, oh man, like she's done some research.
Yeah.
Like, this is great. We didn't have a problem with it, but it was good to be challenged.
Totally.
So Ollie went in and then I had left already. And then he calls me. He's like, hey, did she challenge you and all? I'm like, yeah. He goes, oh, man, I loved it. Do you remember
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
What
It
are
was
some of
really
the
good.
stuff she challenged you on?
Qualifications, training, background. There's a lot of making sure that we don't have confirmation bias. So, kind of like Scott said, is one of the things that we do kind of continuously on scene is that we try not to feed confirmation bias. So if Scott gets there before me or he ends up talking to a homeowner as I'm inside and I come out to switch out a bottle and Scott runs over and goes, oh, hey, he said he was smoking or he said that they said they were cooking. Sometimes I'll put my hand up and say, hey, Scott, no, I don't want to know that yet
Yeah.
because I want to get my area of origin first. And then I want to get all of my different ignition sources and I want to eliminate them. I don't want to hear that the homeowner said or
Yeah.
the neighbor said, because what that does is then I start to naturally as a human, you just start to confirm things and you start to
Yeah.
not look at things as closely. And so in general, we really try to train and teach on just staying away from that confirmation bias because or else
Yeah,
you just
it's-
miss things.
It's almost like letting the facts purely tell the story, and you
Right.
guys are the ones that are just finding the facts and putting them in order.
We'll let the forensics let us go as far as we can. So, and I think we mentioned it in a previous episode, but we can only use fire dynamics, fire effects, and witness statements to determine our origin. So we try to stick with fire effects, fire dynamics before we get a witness statement or the origin and cause investigator. But sometimes you can only get it down to a room, and then there's so much damage. Like I can only get here.
Sure.
I have like 3 competing hypotheses. And then I'll go, what if I told you they were smoking? And he goes, well, that's one area of origin. And so it will help you get down to a more
Yeah.
specific area of origin.
Mhm.
But, and I don't know if we did this in the previous episode, but so confirmation bias, how I teach my students is don't think of a pink elephant. Well, what are you thinking of?
A pink elephant.
So even though I told you not to, you're now thinking of that. So if I tell him, oh, this family was fighting and they got in a fight, and this guy said she set the fire, now you are unconsciously looking for arson. And so that's why we have a real good relationship.
Yeah. It just happened to be on a fire 2 nights ago, and that's why I got bags under my eyes. We had a fire where the homeowner lives alone. He went to his bedroom and he's sitting on his bed, getting ready to bed. He's an elderly male or elderly guy lives by himself, and he sees a glow and a fire in the family room where he was just watching TV. And so he goes ahead and tells me that he was in there. He was smoking, and right before bed, he was smoking a cigarette. And he always puts it on the ashtray. And so I went there to talk to my partner, who was doing the origin and cause, and this room had flashed. So there was.
We need to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, does flash means accelerate? I don't know.
No, just full room involvement. So the fire had gotten so big, so intense that it had basically consumed everything inside. All the furniture was down to the metal, screws and springs. All the drywall was completely torched.
Wow.
It's just a lot of extra fire damage.
Got it.
It wasn't just isolated to just one area.
Okay.
And so my partner said, "Man, I've got down to this room for sure. Fire patterns and effects have showed me that this is the room of origin, but I'm having a difficult time without any more information to get it down to an area of origin." And I did that thing where I said, well, would it help to tell you that he was in here 45 minutes before? This is what he was doing. This is his activities. And then he left. He said, oh, okay, that helps a lot. But he still, at the end of the day, that report is going to, he can't eliminate some electrical items that are also in there with a significant fire damage. So without further forensic testing, he's not going to be able to eliminate electrical, even though the homeowner said, I was smoking in that chair, in my armchair, and I started to fall asleep 45 minutes before the fire. Most likely, most probably, that was what would cause the fire, but we're going to keep it electrical in there until further testing can be done.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was your first fire. Can you go over, I know you have one more.
Yeah.
And I know this was another, this was a lot of work and interesting fire.
Yeah. So sometimes fires, they're quick and easy, kind of like medical aids. Sometimes it's a stub toe and sometimes it's a full arrest. And so the second fire was actually 11 different fires over a span of about an hour and a half. And it actually was responded to by 4 different engines. So who were going on these small little trash can fires. Now it was in early mornings of 4 or 5 in the morning. And so as these engines went on these calls, they weren't able to see that the surrounding engines were also responding to these different calls, because sometimes they would clear a call, and then another one would happen, and a different engine would respond.
Okay.
And
Which city is this? Do you mind?
Down in South Canada, Laguna Hills.
Laguna Hills. Okay.
Yeah. So like engine 39, engine 22, engine 51.
Yeah.
Those engines were all responding, and to dispatch's credit, they're able to see the big picture, right?
Sure.
So they're able to say like, oh, you know what? That's the third trash can fire. Yes, 51's it's the first one, and it's only 39's first one, but dispatch is able to see the big picture.
Yeah,
and so,
collectively suspicious.
which is super helpful. It just shows like how we all kind of play our part in working together to make things happen. So
Totally.
there was actually a total of 11 that ended up getting found. So not all of them were even dispatched to. We only dispatched to 7 out of the 11 because as we were looking, there was actually other fires that were never reported. Because this is at 4 a.m. This is in a commercial area, so we found a few of them. And then as we're investigating some of fire number 4. I look 100 yards away and I see another fire that was never even responded to.
Interesting. How does that work with you guys getting dispatched to so many fires? Because I feel like, we backfill with engines and then it's become someone else's first due potentially. How does that work with you guys if you're stretched? That's a lot of fires to be dispatched to.
It is. And for something like this in a smaller area, we then take it as one giant case, right?
Oh, I see. Okay.
So if I have a trash can on fire on, First and Main, and then I have a dumpster fire at 4th and Main, I'll investigate both of those collectively, and I'll include them as 2 separate fires, but I will also write them in either, I'll still document all of it, and I'll take it collectively as one. So especially if we have, more evidence that says we have a camera or witnesses that, a suspect lit fire number 1, walked over there and lit up fire number 2, we don't just close it out and say, well, call a different investigator. I mean, we
Yeah.
take it as one entire case.
Oh, okay, so you just got it.
Yeah. So this ended up being 11 different fires, and one of the fires we found a molotov cocktail, which is a weapon basically that somebody makes and pours an ignitable liquid, in this case gasoline, into a clear glass breakable container, and then puts a wick on it. So kind of trying to make a bomb. Right?
Yeah.
So, and they used that on one of the fires, and then on another fire, they tried to make another wicking device where they draped over some fabric open over the dumpster onto the outside, and they tried to light it like another device, which it wasn't successful.
What was that fabric?
It was 3 neckties tied together. Yeah, yeah, it was very unsuccessful.
Interesting.
Because I remember we're not trying to train people how to be arsonists,
Yeah.
but if you want to use neckties and drape them over, we would love that. Just if you are in the interest or in the interested in starting a fire, you can use the neckties. We can get DNA, we can get everything off those, and that's not that's not what you normally see. So we know there's intent behind that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Well, and I was going to
absolutely-
say too, like the fact that it's a necktie, like, I mean, unless you work at like Cheesecake.
You were going to say it was a guy?
Yeah. Well, I was going to, okay.
You'd be right, because most percentage of arsonists are male.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. And well, I was just going to say too, like, okay, we may not release that publicly because you guys are still investigating something, but it's super helpful for you to know as you are
We would
looking at
never tell the
suspects.
public during the investigation.
No,
because
totally.
What if that becomes his calling card?
Yeah.
His or her. At this case, it's
Sure.
a him. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So we were investigating those fires, and so it was nice. We have multiple law enforcement agencies. So we had Irvine PD involved. We had Orange County Sheriff involved because of the jurisdiction. We had multiple investigators come in and to help out. We had, I think we brought in Freedom, our K9. And so there was a lot of pieces going on. And they ended up finding the suspect. He was still in the area, and I think he was in the midst of planning to try to light fire number 12. And he was caught basically in the act.
Huh.
He ended up being interviewed, and we ended up charging him with, I think we were able to charge him with, he pled guilty to 7 out of the 11 fires.
Wow. And did he confess like openly, or did that take some?
He pled in court. So we
Okay.
arrested him. He went to court, and between his lawyer and the deputy district attorney, he pled guilty.
Got it.
Yeah, it didn't go all the way to a jury trial or something like that, but he pled guilty on the front end.
Is that common that you guys see? Because I know we talked about this. I think this was our first episode or second episode where they set multiple fires across a couple different days. Is that because that seems like a way to get caught, in my opinion, just to set a bunch in the same vicinity? Is that typically common for arsonists?
I'll let you answer, and then I
would just say that I'm sure that there's studies probably, and people a lot more smarter than me that have spent a lot more time studying serial arsonists versus somebody who's committed arson, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a one-time, one-off deal versus somebody who this is their MO for whatever their motive is they set lots of fires. And I've been in the section now for 5 years, and I've already gotten to experience multiple cases where there's an actual person who's actively setting multiple fires. We know that it's most probably the same person. And even though we are there on scene investigating, we've put out public releases, that same person has then gone and started another fire in a very similar area, almost like toying with us. It's been very fascinating to watch.
So interesting.
So when you're talking about on our first episode, I think we're talking about the serial arsonist who went and was starting.
73.
Was setting fires there. Okay, that was over a long time span. I think it was a year or so, if I remember.
Yeah.
The one he's talking about, we'll get these like sprees where
that's a good word.
where someone will either on foot and they seem to love the trash cans next to the Orange County Transit Authority for some reason.
Very, very receptive.
They'll set them on fire, and they'll just walk in a path and do it. Or we had one similar to yours. He had set like 19 fires, and we see all these engines, so we can see on our phones what
Right.
engines are going where, and it comes up as miscellaneous fire or refuse fire. And we see all these engines getting dispatched, and we're like, this guy is flying. So he had to have been on a bike. He or she. Sure enough, we were able to get a ring cam from one of the like 19 fires of a guy on a bike going, and then we ended up catching him this started at like 3 p.m, and the first fire was near a planned pregnancy business. So we're like, maybe they're being targeted. And then we get another one. And so it stopped. And about 1 in the morning, it started up again. And we ended up finding him at about 4 in the morning near the last fire. And we ended up arresting him.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But that's a long day. And then each of those fires gets its own, like you have to dig through the trash
Totally.
and make sure this was an intentionally set fire.
Yeah, you really have to do your due diligence. I mean, even for this one with 11 fires, 11 fires in a relatively close area, I still have to show that I've done my due diligence to prove that this is even possible for this person to light all these fires, right? So I can't just be, well, I'm the law enforcement guy, I'm the fire department, so just trust me and say that, oh yeah, he lit a fire in Yorba Linda, and then 20 minutes later on foot he lit a fire in San Clemente. Well, then no, that's unreasonable, right?
Yeah.
So I actually had to create a
in California traffic.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so you have to write. I created a document showing with Google Maps and copying and pasting, showing the different routes, and that there's actually it was a 90-second walk to this one. It was a minute and a half walk to this one by foot, and showing those timetables so that you could at least then you can. That's part of the probable cause. Is this reasonable that he was able to commit these things on foot? Yes, this is my hypothesis that this individual lit these fires in a row, and this is how he did it, and this is how he traveled.
Yeah.
So when he makes that timeline, he's trying to disprove, like, maybe he couldn't have done all these.
Right.
Now you do it, you're like, actually, it fits in. So that actually goes into this proves it file.
Totally.
You know?
By kind of making that layout, not only are you proving that he did it, but you're proving there's no one else that could have done it based on all of the evidence. So
yeah, it's the right thing to do with integrity too. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to put any innocent person in
100%.
jail or hold them accountable for something they didn't do. So I strongly believe that we have to do our due diligence just for integrity purposes. You have to take all the possibilities. You have to test all the hypotheses. And at the end of the day, with the one that we're left is the one that is what happened. It's not my gut feeling. It's not what I think happened, maybe, possibly, let's squeeze it through. There's no other way that nothing else could have happened except this event.
Yeah. The evidence is showing what happened.
I'm really curious because I enjoy a real good relationship with the San Diego Innocence Center, which goes after wrongful convictions, including arson. So, and when I taught the class 5 years ago, you were part of it, and I brought the defense attorney from the Innocence Center in. And I don't know if that shifted your paradigm or not, but I know when we're on scene, and I won't use her name, but how would she challenge us? We're always thinking of the defense. Do you do that?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Did that interaction with that attorney help you think like that?
Because a lot of times we'll get on scene and an engine company who's called us out, and which we're really grateful for, they call us out on the front end, and they'll point to somebody that they have told to sit on the curb. This guy, this individual was here when we got here, and we told them to sit down, and they did, and they complied. And we said, okay, and they said, yeah, they lit the fire. Well, how do you know they lit the fire? Well, they're the only ones here. Well, they're the only ones here on this bike trail? I mean, yeah, they're the only ones when you got here. But if I was on a bike trail walking by and there was a fire in a bush, I'd probably stand there too. You know, it's what's very common on a car accident. You lose, right?
Yeah.
We had the giant airplane or the airport the hangar fire. There's thousands of people standing on the side of the road with their cameras, right? It's so the fact that the only probable cause is that they were the only ones here, quote unquote, is not enough for me, you know?
And that's okay for our fire suppression crews to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
They're excellent at fire suppression. They're excellent. I love working with them. But that's why it gets kicked off to us, because now we have to go through the process that we've been trained on to make sure it went through some kind of scientific method and that we've looked at any and all hypotheses. And so it works out real well.
Yeah.
But, it is hard because someone's like, well, clearly he did it. We're like, well, why do you think that?
Yeah.
And then these guys, you sit at the coffee table with them, their families, you're like, oh, well, I trust you. And they're like, well, he's the only guy there. You're like, all right.
Yeah, but then they're not
need a
trained
little-
like you guys
no.
are. Yeah.
But they're trying to help.
Totally.
And they're always wanting to help.
And our gut will know, yeah, he did it, right? We know that person lit the fire.
Right.
But let's go beyond that and let's prove it. And let's make sure we disprove everything else, because worst case scenario, you put an innocent person, incarcerated or charge them with something that they actually didn't do. So whether my gut knows that, yeah, most likely that person did it based on everything else I see, based on my experience, based on my training, but we still have to go through the process, because that's, basically, if we don't have that, our country's founded on that.
Yeah, 100%.
And because of that approach, and it's known at our DA's office, we enjoy a very good relationship and a lot of trust with our deputy DAs that prosecute our cases.
Yeah.
And so it's helped us. Almost all of our cases go through.
Yeah.
Nothing's like, we're not taking that.
Yeah.
Well, because you guys take it so seriously.
Well, they look at the effort we put in, and I can only speak to me and Ollie and maybe Burns, but we build the case for trial level scrutiny.
Yeah, we all do that, I think,
Yeah.
as a section. Yeah. I mean, we just had that last couple weeks ago. Scott and I had a vehicle fire, and it was completely burned up inside, and there had been somebody living in there. And, I eliminated that there was a mechanical electrical failure. And Scott said, wow, how'd you do that? You can't eliminate that right now. And I turned to him and said, well, no, the vehicle's been inoperable, and they have it on camera that it hasn't moved in over 2 years. He's like, oh, well, I didn't know. And it doesn't have a car battery. I checked. There's no car battery.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. That's how you eliminate it, right? So we do that all the time. We constantly pushing back and questioning and making sure that we're challenging each other here on this front end in our office or on scene versus, at court.
Yeah. No, I love that. Great job.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for bringing these stories to us. We loved them. Hopefully the community loved them as much as I did.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah. And we'll see you guys next time.
Yes, thank you.